Hi again. In this final video, I will argue that one of the best ways to become a better educator is by reflecting on and making changes to becoming a role model for the students. So, this is a picture of my children. And like any other parent, I often ask myself how to teach them to become good people in the future, moral people, people who live according to the values I claim to have. So when my first daughter Leah was born, I talked about this a lot with my colleagues. I'm a ethicist if I trade, so I had no problem with discussing morality with my colleagues, as you might imagine. Uh, but I asked them, so how? I talked to them. So how can I raise moral children or moral people? And I never really got a satisfactory answer, even though we talked about it a lot. So then one time, uh, one parent, I replied that the best, maybe the only thing that you can do to make your children grow up to be good people is to be a good person yourself. And this is, of course, an uncomfortable thought because I don't know, uh, but because I do know that I don't live as I teach. But that parent was right, that it is by observing me, among other things, that my children learn about good action. Whether I like it or not, this is something that I cannot avoid. So if I want to raise my children to adopt good values, it is also means that I must critically examine how I act in my everyday life. So just as I cannot prevent my children from learning how to be a good person by observing how I act in my everyday life, educators cannot prevent their students from learning what, for instance, academic values are or good practices are by observing them. Accordingly, educators are role models. It's unavoidable. This is so ingrained in our view of an educator that a description of a good teacher usually includes a description of their moral character. We believe that educators are individuals who can positively shape a student by acting as a successful exemplar. Thus, what a role model does is that they demonstrate to their actions what is expected of the students, and therefore what is desirable. As it is sometimes said, you cannot be what you cannot see. The importance of this is understood in the teacher training programs. Future educators are taught ethics so that they can better assume the responsibility of educating students. This means learning the ethical aspects of educational practices. They also learn how to deal with ethically charged situations specific to the professional role so that they are better able to deal with them when they arise. A responsible educator is further perceived as someone aware of the intentional or unintentional influence they have on students, so that they can better direct their learning in a way that benefit their personal, social, emotional, and moral development. Let me quickly take an example that illustrates why this is important. Teach for critical thinking. If you want your students to develop critical thinking skills, it is important that you show them an example of what critical thinking entails. Critical thinking is, again, a concept that has been interpreted in many different ways, and it is also used in different ways depending on which subject area you are uh, thinking critically in. But an educator who wants to model critical thinking to the students should ask themselves, do I put other perspectives down, or do I critically engage with them? Am I willing to acknowledge my assumption and critically assess them? Am I willing to let my perspectives and assumptions be scrutinized by others' critical review? Am I willing to strive towards understanding, perhaps even appreciating other people's differing opinions, whether it concerns their views, methodology, use of theory, conclusions, use of material, etc., etc.? Am I willing to take informed action in line with my critical endeavors? And if I'm not, how can I teach critical thinking to my students if I'm not willing to act critically in a critically engaging way? So, as a side note, as always, the Center for Teaching and Learning arranges an elective course in educating for critical thinking. You are also welcome to take that course if you want. Critical thinking is just one example. We could just as well ask ourselves, if I want to develop curious students, I show them curiosity when teaching, what it's like to be a curious person when teaching. If I want students to read books, do I read books myself? If I want them to turn into turn in well-written works? Do I take the time for my presentations, my handouts, and PowerPoints, my works, to be similarly well done? If I want them to discuss controversial issues with respect and tolerance, do I treat the students with myself with respect and tolerance? The list could be made longer. What I want to say in this concluding video then is that educators in higher education, whether we like it or not, are role models for our students. I would therefore like to challenge you during the course of the program to not only reflect on what practical benefit the theories and practices that we teach can have for your current or future work. I also want you to see this time as a chance to critically examine yourself. Accordingly, I hope you ask yourself, how can I become a better role model for my students? Ideally speaking, this shouldn't only be an individual effort. Again, we should welcome engaging conversations with colleagues about what it means to be a role model in our respective subject areas. Therefore, I also hope that your fellow participants in the program can act as such a conversations partner so that you can explore and problematize what it really means to be a role model. And of course, if you work at the Department of Education, talk to your colleagues. They are invaluable in your own educational development. So in this lecture, I've given some suggestions on how to become a better educator in higher education, as well as given some critical perspectives on whether educational development is necessary at all. The suggestions I make are not exhaustive in any stretch of the imagination, but I still hope that this lecture has given you some food for thought that you can take with you through the course of the program. But also, I look forward to taking part of your experiences and perspectives during the course of the program so that we can together develop this list further. Thank you for watching. Take care.